The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was plain white, folded carefully, with my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. My grandmother's handwriting. But she had been dead for 3 months. For a long time, I just stood in my apartment doorway holding that envelope. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Because for most of my life, I had learned not to expect anything from my family, not explanations, not apologies, not invitations, and definitely not love. I was the forgotten child. The one who never appeared in family photos unless someone remembered at the last minute. The one whose birthday was accidentally combined with someone else's celebration. The one who watched my older brother get praise, attention, expensive gifts, and endless second chances while I was told to be grateful for whatever was left. But my grandmother had always seen me. And that letter was about to reveal a truth my parents had spent nearly 30 years trying to bury. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy emotional stories about family drama, karma, forgotten children, betrayal, boundaries, and life-changing truths, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever grown up feeling invisible inside their own family. My name is Ethan. I was 34 years old when the letter arrived. Growing up, I had an older brother named Ryan. Ryan was 2 years older than me, louder than me, more confident than me, and according to my parents, better than me at almost everything. If Ryan got a B, my parents said he was under pressure and deserved support. If I got a B, they asked why I wasn't trying harder. If Ryan forgot to do chores, Mom would say, "He's busy. Don't make a big deal out of it." If I forgot to do chores, Dad would take away my phone for a week. If Ryan got into trouble at school, my parents blamed the teachers, the other kids, the school system, or boys being boys. If I got into trouble, even for something small, I was told I was embarrassing the family. At first, I thought this was normal. I thought every family had a favorite child and a child who had to work twice as hard just to avoid being criticized. But as I got older, I started realizing it wasn't just favoritism. It was neglect. My parents didn't just love Ryan more loudly. They barely seemed to notice me at all. I remember my 10th birthday clearly. My parents had promised we would go bowling. I had invited 3 friends from school. I had been excited for weeks. My mom even let me pick out a chocolate cake with blue icing. But the morning of my birthday, Ryan got invited to a last-minute soccer tournament 2 towns away. My parents decided we had to go. They told my friends we could reschedule bowling. They told me I should understand because Ryan's tournament was important. Then they packed snacks, folding chairs, blankets, and Ryan's sports bag into the car. I remember standing in the driveway holding my birthday cake box while my mom said, "We'll celebrate later, okay?" Later never came. That evening, Ryan came home tired and happy because his team had won 2nd place. My dad ordered pizza for everyone. Mom lit 2 candles in the cake after dinner. Ryan blew out one of them as a joke. Everyone laughed. I didn't. That was the day I stopped expecting my birthday to matter. It wasn't one big event that made me feel forgotten. It was hundreds of small moments. At school concerts, my parents showed up late because Ryan had practice. At parent-teacher conferences, they spent most of the time asking about Ryan's grades before rushing through mine. When I got accepted into a summer science program, my dad said, "That's nice," then immediately started talking about Ryan's chance to make varsity. When I won a small scholarship for college, my mom asked whether it would cover enough money so they wouldn't have to help me. But when Ryan wanted a newer car, my parents co-signed a loan without even thinking about it. By the time I left for college, I had learned how to survive without asking for much. I went to a state school 2 hours away and worked part-time in the library. I studied accounting because it was practical and because I wanted a life where I could depend on myself. My parents barely visited. Ryan, meanwhile, stayed close to home. He changed majors twice, dropped out for a semester, got into trouble with credit cards, and moved back into my parents' house more than once. They called it finding himself. When I graduated, I invited my parents months in advance. Dad said he might have a work conflict. Mom said she would try. Ryan said he had a friend's birthday party that weekend. My grandmother was the only person who showed up. She sat in the second row holding a bouquet of yellow flowers. She cried when my name was called. Then she took me to lunch at a small diner afterward and told me she was proud of me. It was the first time I can remember feeling celebrated by someone in my family. My grandmother, Eleanor, was my father's mother. She lived in a small house on the edge of town with flower beds, old furniture, and shelves full of books. She never had much money, but she always made me feel like I mattered. When I was a kid, she remembered my birthday. When I was a teenager, she asked about my grades without comparing me to Ryan. When I was in college, she sent handwritten cards with $20 bills inside and messages like, "Buy yourself a proper meal, sweetheart." And when I became an adult, she was the only person in my family who asked how I was doing, and then actually listened to the answer. She knew what my parents were like. She never said it directly when I was young, but she saw it. I remember once, when I was 14, my parents forgot to pick me up after an after-school club. I waited outside in the rain for nearly an hour. Eventually, the school secretary called my grandmother. She came to get me. On the drive home, she didn't ask why I hadn't called my parents. She just turned up the heater, handed me a dry cardigan, and said, "Some people get so busy loving the loudest person in the room that they forget to see the quiet one." I didn't understand what she meant then. I did later. After college, I got a job at a small accounting firm. I rented a studio apartment. I paid my bills. I built a quiet life. I didn't cut my family off completely. I tried. I called on holidays. I sent birthday gifts. I showed up to family dinners whenever I was invited. But I was usually invited as an afterthought. My parents would call 2 days before Thanksgiving and say, "Oh, you're welcome to come if you don't have plans." At Christmas, Ryan's girlfriend, then fiancé, then wife would always be included in the planning group chat. I wasn't. When my parents moved into a bigger house, Ryan got the guest room keys. I slept on an air mattress in the basement when I visited. I told myself I didn't care. But I did. The hardest part about being the forgotten child is not the loneliness. It's the way you begin to question yourself. You start asking whether you are too difficult to love. Whether you did something wrong. Whether maybe you really are less important. For years, I carried that question everywhere. Then my grandmother got sick. It happened slowly at first. She forgot appointments. She misplaced things. She started calling me by my father's name sometimes. But even on her worst days, she remembered me. I visited her every weekend. I helped with groceries, prescriptions, laundry, doctor appointments, and bills. I didn't do it because I expected anything in return. I did it because she had been there for me when no one else was. My father visited too, but not often. Ryan almost never did. He would say he was busy with work, busy with the kids, busy with life. But I saw the truth. He only came around when he needed something. One afternoon, while I was helping Grandma organize paperwork, Ryan showed up unexpectedly. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring groceries. He didn't even ask how she was feeling. He sat at her kitchen table and started asking about her house. "Have you thought about what you're going to do with this place?" he asked. Grandma looked confused. Ryan smiled and said, "I mean, eventually. It's a lot of property. You should probably make sure everything is organized." I was furious. But Grandma just looked at him quietly. Then she said, "Everything is organized." Ryan laughed like she had made a joke. But she hadn't. 3 months later, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was small. My father cried. My mother cried. Ryan cried too, but mostly when people were watching. I stood near the back, numb and exhausted. Grandma had been the one person who made me feel seen. Without her, I felt like I was losing the only witness to my childhood. After the funeral, my dad told me not to worry about the legal stuff. He said he and Ryan would handle it. That sentence stayed with me. Not because I cared about money. I didn't. But because they still saw me as someone who didn't need to be included. A week later, my father called and told me Grandma had left the house to him. He said it like it was obvious. She was my mother, he said. It makes sense. Then he added, Ryan and I will figure out whether to sell it or rent it. I asked, was there a will? He paused. There was paperwork. Don't worry about it. I should have pushed harder. But years of being ignored had trained me not to ask questions. So I said okay. 3 months passed. I went back to work. I tried to move forward. I missed my grandmother constantly. Then, on that Tuesday morning, the letter arrived. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a handwritten note and a business card for a law firm. The note said, Ethan, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I am sorry I could not tell you these things while I was here. Please call Ms. Bennett. And remember, you were never forgotten. Love always, Grandma. I read it 6 times. Then I called the number. The lawyer, Ms. Bennett, asked me to come to her office that afternoon. I almost didn't go. Part of me was afraid it was a mistake. Part of me was afraid it would be nothing. But Grandma had written my name. She had remembered me. So I went. Ms. Bennett was an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She led me into a private office, offered me coffee, and placed a thick folder on the table. Then she said, Your grandmother asked me to wait until 3 months after her passing before contacting you. She wanted to make sure there was no pressure from your father or brother. My chest tightened. What is this? Ms. Bennett opened the folder. It is your grandmother's final estate plan. I stared at the papers. She explained that my father had inherited the house, but not in the way he believed. Grandma had placed the property in a trust. My father could live there for as long as he wanted. He could not sell it. He could not mortgage it. He could not transfer it to Ryan. And when my father passed away, the house would belong to me. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. Grandma had also created a separate account in my name. For 20 years, she had quietly been depositing small amounts of money from her pension, savings, and the income from a piece of land she had inherited from her sister. The account was not enormous by wealthy family standards. But to me, it was life-changing. It was enough to pay off my student loans, build savings, and finally put a down payment on a home. I started crying. Not because of the money. Because she had spent 20 years planning for me. The child everyone else forgot. Ms. Bennett handed me another envelope. This is the letter she asked us to give you after we reviewed the trust, she said. My hands shook as I opened it. Grandma wrote that she knew my parents had always favored Ryan. She wrote that she had tried to talk to my father many times, but he always became defensive. She wrote that my mother told her I was too sensitive. Then she wrote something I will never forget, you were not difficult. You were not less lovable. You were simply the child who learned to need less because no one gave you enough. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Every question I had carried since childhood suddenly had an answer. It wasn't me. It had never been me. Grandma's letter explained why she had structured the trust the way she did. She knew my father would assume the house was his. She knew Ryan would expect to inherit it eventually. She wanted them to understand that family is not just blood. It is responsibility. It is attention. It is showing up. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I cannot make them become the family you deserved. But I can make sure you have the freedom to build one of your own." I left Ms. Bennett's office in a daze. I sat in my car for almost an hour. Then my phone rang. It was my father. He sounded angry. Why did a lawyer call me about a trust? I took a deep breath. Because Grandma had an estate plan. You knew about this? No, well, you need to tell her that this is ridiculous. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly at the end. I looked out through my windshield. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of disappointing him. Grandma was thinking clearly, I said. He went quiet. Then he said, "Your brother has a family, Ethan. He needs that house." I closed my eyes. And there it was. Not grief. Not fairness. Not love. Just Ryan. I said, "Dad, you can live in the house. That was Grandma's decision. But you and Ryan don't get to decide what happens to me anymore." He raised his voice. "You're being selfish." I almost laughed. For 34 years, I had been trained to give up space, attention, time, money, and even basic dignity so that other people could stay comfortable. And now, the first time I said no, I was selfish. I told him, "I'm not being selfish. I'm respecting Grandma's wishes." Then I hung up. My mother called next. She cried. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this to the family. I said, "I'm not doing anything. Grandma made a plan." She said Ryan was upset. I said, "Ryan has been upset before. He'll survive." That was the first boundary I had ever spoken out loud. And it changed everything. Ryan called me that night. At first, he tried being friendly. "Hey, little brother. I heard there was some confusion with Grandma's house." "There's no confusion," I said. He sighed. "Look, Dad needs help. I need help. You don't even have kids." I felt something inside me go completely still. For years, I had been waiting for them to finally see me. But they didn't. They only saw what they could take from me. So I said, "You're right. I don't have kids. I have my own life. And I'm going to start treating it like it matters." He became angry. He said I was punishing them. He said I had always been jealous. He said Grandma had been manipulated. I let him talk. Then I said, "Grandma knew exactly who showed up for her." And I ended the call. The next few months were difficult. My parents stopped speaking to me for a while. Ryan sent messages through other relatives. Some family members called me selfish without knowing any details. Others stayed silent because they didn't want to get involved. But something unexpected happened too. My aunt, my father's younger sister, called me. She said, "Your grandmother told me years ago that she worried about you." I didn't know what to say. My aunt told me that Grandma had noticed everything. The missed birthdays. The forgotten invitations. The way Ryan was praised for things I was expected to do without thanks. "She wanted to protect you," my aunt said. "She just didn't know how while she was alive." For the first time, I realized I hadn't been invisible to everyone. Just to the people who should have seen me most. I used part of the money to pay off my student loans. I used another part to buy a small townhouse near my work. Nothing huge. Nothing fancy. But it had a little office where I could work from home, a kitchen with sunlight in the morning, and a small back patio where I planted the same yellow flowers Grandma used to grow. The first night I slept there, I sat on the floor because I hadn't unpacked furniture yet. And I cried. Not sad tears. Not exactly. They were the tears of someone realizing they had finally made a home that didn't require permission. A year later, my father got sick. Not seriously at first, but enough that he couldn't manage the house alone. Ryan was supposed to help him. But Ryan was busy. He was always busy. So my father called me. For a few seconds, I stared at the phone. The old version of me would have rushed over immediately. Not because I wanted to. Because I believed I had to earn love by being useful. But I had changed. I drove over the next day. I helped him set up medication reminders. I called a home care service. I fixed a few things around the house. I made sure he had groceries. Then I sat down with him at the kitchen table. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He said, "I know you're angry." I said, "I'm not angry all the time anymore." He looked at me. Then he said, "Your grandmother was right about some things." That was as close to an apology as my father knew how to give. I waited. He looked down at his hands. "I thought Ryan needed more because he always needed more. And I thought you were fine because you never asked for anything." My throat tightened. "I didn't ask because I learned it wouldn't matter." He nodded slowly. "I know that now." We sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry. It didn't erase everything. It didn't fix my childhood. But it mattered." My mother apologized too, eventually. She came to my townhouse one afternoon with a small plant for my patio. She looked around the kitchen, the office, the photos on the wall. "You've made a beautiful life," she said. I almost told her I had made it without them. But I didn't. I just said, "I have." She cried. Then she said, "I should have protected you more." "Yes," I said. She looked surprised that I didn't tell her it was okay. But I had learned that forgiveness does not require pretending something never hurt. I told her I was willing to have a relationship with her. But only if it was honest. Only if I was not expected to disappear whenever Ryan needed more attention. She agreed. Ryan never really changed. He still complained about Grandma's trust. He still acted like I had stolen something from him. But eventually, I stopped caring. Because I finally understood what Grandma had tried to teach me all along. The letter did not make me rich. It did not make my parents suddenly perfect. It did not turn Ryan into a better brother. What it gave me was something more important. Proof. Proof that I had mattered. Proof that someone had seen what I had survived. Proof that I was not difficult to love. I was simply surrounded by people who had failed to love me properly. And once I understood that, I stopped trying to become unforgettable to people who were committed to forgetting me. I built a life where I was seen. I made friends who remembered my birthday. I found a partner who asked about my day and waited for the answer. I created traditions that didn't depend on whether someone else decided I was worth including. And every spring, when the yellow flowers bloom on my patio, I think about Grandma. I think about her letter. And I remember her final words, "You were never forgotten." Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, only to later discover that someone had truly seen you? Subscribe for more stories about family karma, forgotten children, boundaries, healing, personal growth, and life lessons. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone else decide your worth.